Hello. Today we're going to be talking about transferable skills. More importantly than just talking about transferable skills, and more importantly than just talking about how to get good at games fast, I'm going to take a very real example of someone who I've spoken to a lot, who's been improving in games like Pokemon very dramatically at a very fast rate, and only played for about a year, 2 years, give or take, but picked up the game very fast by applying skills from other games that they've played and other experiences that they've had to improve at a dramatically increased rate, to the point to where, in Pokemon especially, they've gotten a day 2 at NAIC just this past week, using skills acquired from games like League of Legends, Destiny, and Rainbow Six. Let's talk about it. So, improving off the clock. We're going to go over a couple of different things. We're going to talk about transferable skills themselves, the different categorizations of skills and how to interpret those skills. Actually outlining what skills you're able to take from one area to another, especially in broadly different games and experiences, and how to fine-tune those skills, how to train those skills, declaring the different problems that you need to identify to know what to improve, and then also looking at application examples through Pokemon, through what a good friend of mine, TCG Cow, has done in order to improve at Pokemon at such a dramatic rate. So let's talk about transferable skills a little bit, and that synchronous training idea. It's in a very basic way, it is taking skills from one area and moving it to another. So an obvious example that many people are used to at this point is going from a game like Counter-Strike with aim mechanics and moving it over to Valorant, or taking aim mechanics from Overwatch and moving it to Marvel Rivals, just generally taking it to where if you're able to aim in one game, you should be able to aim in another as long as your sensitivity is the same. That makes a whole lot of sense, and to a lot of people is very logical. But it's not just a one-track thing where it's like, oh, aim in one area to aim in another area. It's a bit more diverse than that. A couple other examples is puzzle solving and conflict resolution, trying to figure out how to keep everyone as happy as possible but still move towards an end goal. That is a sort of puzzle to a lot of people, trying to navigate how to manage how people are feeling about different things, different perspectives, and come to the best possible solution. Another example is presentations and in-game leading in tactical games. Being able to have no doubt in yourself and share what you have to share, pairing that with the ability to take a look at all sides of something and share your findings, share your knowledge, and guide people. Very similar sets of skills, all things considered. And I could go on about that for more and more, but that's what the rest of the video is for. I'm not going to bore you on that all too quickly. But I do want to say that working on multi-dimensional skill sets through transferable skills is very nice for a couple of different reasons. One, it means that you don't need to do the same thing over and over again in order to improve. You can do different things at different paces, but it also means you can take breaks from activities and still retain key trainings of skills, or you can predict what games and what things you're going to be good at based on what you do in your other games, activities, lifestyles, and what skills you've already trained without even knowing that you've trained them. So let's carry that over and talk about why take breaks, because I mentioned taking breaks and it's not an intuitive concept to everyone. Well, there's two key reasons. It's exhaustion and burnout, but I want to get more in depth. So, when it comes to the reliance on games, if you are someone who plays a game a lot, let's say you play 2,000, 3,000 hours of a game in however many years, whatever it might be, right? If you get too experienced in that game and too attached to that gameplay loop, let's say it's a competitive game, like something like a League of Legends, because it's great for that game to be a punching bag. If you're really attached to your wins and losses, and if your mental state is very attached to that, it will start to take away your mental health a little bit, and that really starts to deteriorate your way of thinking. In addition to that, it makes it to where if you do something too much, you are going to fall into habits, you are going to fall into bad behaviors overall, and your thinking is going to become a lot more rigid on how to approach different types of obstacles. It means that your progression in improving at different traits is very static, and you're not willing to really break out of the norms that you've developed in order to grow in different and unique ways. it means that your progression isn't going to be as fluid as it otherwise would be, because you are seeing what you see and you don't want to listen to anything else. But also it means that you have a much more fixed mindset in doing just what you know. You're not willing to break out of your shell. You're not willing to experiment with new things. You're just going to do what you like. It might not necessarily be the correct option. So it's important to break out of that and take breaks in general to not kind of lock yourself in at your current progress level. In addition, it's good to just not be bored. You need to keep improvement enjoyable. You need to keep your experiences diverse. You need to make sure that you're not just doing something in a mundane way and making it not fun for yourself. If taking a break will make something better for you, then take that break all you need. So I want to quickly highlight a video, because a lot of the rest of the video is going to be formatted around the content from this video. It will be down in the description. It is by Cernex. It is a video that is talking about seeing competitive games differently, and it is about the exact concepts that I am going to be going over. In fact, my video is slightly inspired over there. I'm going to try to tread as little ground as possible, because I am talking about working on varied skill sets at once, not just seeing what games you're going to be good at, and there's a lot of good points in that video. The link will be down in the description, but it's also on the screen for your viewing. I might try to do that little title card thing as well. I don't really know how to do that, but I might try to do that. But I strongly recommend you guys all give the video a look. And with that, we're going to carry on to the main skill categorization thing that they're talking about in the video. The idea of micro skills, macro skills, and meso skills. I do come from a background with child and youth studies, so we hear these three words a lot when it comes to how to orient skill sets and how to orient relationships between different factors, but it's also really good for gameplay and game fundamentals. So, what are some examples of micro skills? They're game-specific physical traits. It's things like precision, execution, and taking action precisely, calculatedly, and consistently. Those are your micro skills. We're going to talk examples of that in just a second. Macro skills, on the other hand, are more about understanding, comprehension, and understanding the full picture. It's about the operations that you're going to be going under to try and win something. It's about decision-making skills. It's about understanding how to go about different outcomes in order to get to an end result. And it's about understanding statistics and following through on statistics to get your outcome as consistently as possible. Finally, we have meso skills, which are interactive and mental interactions. More so, it is the assumption skills, trying to figure out what an opponent might be doing or what they might have in hand if you're on a card game, or what different potential they might be going about, how to work with them, how to work against them. All of that sort of stuff falls under meso skills. In addition, it's adaptation to what your opponent does in order to properly adjust your macro skills to refine those features and traits, and it is the ability to predict what an opponent might have, what they might be able to do, and how to read their resources or positioning. So let's talk about actually training those skills in different areas. I have a couple examples from card games, a couple of examples from shooters, because those are my two main disciplines, all things considered. And by the way, that is not me in ranked. I just took a screenshot off the internet in order to get a thing of a HUD, because I need to explain why HUDs are good to use for a different type of skill. Let's ignore that. Let's go over the list. So in micro skills, for a card game, it might be something like shuffling speed, board management, and resource management in the very literal sense of just moving something somewhere fast. There's not a lot of inherent skill when it comes to playing a card game for physical attributes and training of skills in the physical way. Meanwhile, in something like video games, it'll be things like aim training, it'll be things like tracking, it'll be things like being able to see a target, stop, move your mouse to them, click, shoot. That type of stuff is all micro skills. It's the things that require muscle memory and innate, actual action of doing the thing. It's execution. That's what it is. Micro skills are execution. Macro skills, instead, you'd be thinking about sequencing. You'd be thinking about win conditions. You'd be thinking about the statistics in order to get to your win state in as optimal a way as possible. In something like a video game, you'd be thinking about your spacing. You'd be thinking about your crosshair placement itself. You'd be thinking about resource management. Let's say in Valorant, what agents do you have on your team? How many ultimates do they have? What guns and resources do you have? What types of shields do you have? How many credits do you have? And then going into meso skills, that starts to branch into your awareness of the map and where they are, and what types of weapons they might have based on their economy, what they might do with their ultimates, what strategies they might be running. Those are more examples of meso skills, and in a trading card game, it's reading your opponent's outs, trying to read their choices, trying to figure out what cards are in their deck prior to them putting any cards down. Those are meso skills. So, when it comes to problem declaration, what's a couple of examples of that? When it comes to micro training, it's generally just changing games within the genre so that you can continue to refine your skills in a very linear path. As I mentioned, aim is a great example when it comes to a micro skill. Transferring from one shooter to another is a great example of something you can do for micro training. Additionally though, let's say you're doing speedrunning and you're really consistent at doing Celeste speedrunning. Pivoting over to another high-intensity, micro-focused game with a lot of precise inputs would be very beneficial to that. And my main thought, personally, is actually entirely pivoting over to Brawlhalla. Brawlhalla is a game with a lot of fast movement, a lot of button inputs, a lot of precision required in order to make choices, and whilst Brawlhalla also has a lot of macro training required and meso training required, it's a very primarily micro-focused game when it comes to its combo routing and how to go about moving around a stage. The decision making is more under macro choices, however, it also will refine your micro execution. Then when it comes to macro training, let's say you're doing different tactical games and in-game leading and things like that. You need to think about how you want to approach different scenarios. You want to think about what your opponent, not what they might want to do, but how to approach what they've done. When it comes to strategic planning and execution, it's trying to take a look at a puzzle and figure out how you want to get to a win condition. For example, playing something like League of Legends compared to playing something like chess, or playing all sorts of different collaborative games, and seeing a field of pretty much a puzzle, how you want to execute a plan to get through to the other side, or to win, or to checkmate, or whatever it might be. Knowing statistics and knowledge gathering itself is also another thing where you can just go and research elsewhere. But the main problem you're looking for macro training is, how do I win? How do I plan out my route to victory? What is my most efficient route to victory? That is all under micro training, and any game where you can pose that type of question will get you there. Last but not least, meso training. It's going to be awareness training and managing resources, just taking a look at a lot of different situations and seeing what your opponent may or may not have, deducing things from that. Honestly, meso training is a little bit harder to do in a very general sense, because it is whatever your opponent is doing, whatever you are doing, trying to interact with that. It is working on recollection skills, it's working on pivoting plans on the fly and adjusting very rapidly, and things like that. There's a lot of ways to do it, and in different games it's of different values, but fighting games and first-person shooters with high health pools and long time to kills are very good examples of ways that you can work on meso training, because it is very interactive, non-stop, and will force you to make those decisions on the fly very rapidly, and those skills do carry into every other game. If you watched the video that I had highlighted earlier, you would note that when it comes to all of those different traits, there's kind of different values in every single game of micro, macro, and meso required, and all of them have different balances on how important they are. Trying to find games that focus on macros or micros or mesos will improve those skills at dramatically faster rates and keep things interesting for you as well. Let's talk Pokemon examples. For micro skills, there's not a whole lot. You can work on shuffling and just make sure that you're shuffling sufficiently, but that's something that you do once and then it's memory and you're good. When it comes to board management, it's kind of important to keep your things all in line, but that's not really something too precise that you need to actively physically train for. So from that, really, Pokemon doesn't have macro skills that are worth investing a lot of time into. It's not a macro-intensive game. Does make it good if you're not working on physicality and you need a game to pick up, but it's not really a micro game. It is, on the other hand, a very big macro game. I know the right side looks like it's a little bit like generated or whatnot. I swear it's not. I just reversed it because it was better for the framing. You guys have officially made it past the 15-minute mark. You guys have all earned me just kind of rambling about how things are positioned and being a little less formal. Thank you for sticking it out. If you guys did like the content, you can hype down below, you can like down below, and you can comment what you think about different skill sets and what games you've played that have accidentally improved your other gameplays. Anyways, back to macro skills. Something like sequencing. If you can work on different types of puzzle games, it'll be a really good way for you to figure out how to do things in a way that doesn't burn too many resources and also makes sure that you reach your end outcome efficiently. Win conditions. Team co-op games with economies are a great example of that, or closed list games, because in something like Pokemon you have a 60 card deck list, your opponent has a 60 card deck list. You need to figure out how to reach end outcomes. Clash Royale is a really great example, unfortunately. And then statistics management as well. Any game with a predictable randomness aspect to it, or adaptive skill sets and branching that you can adapt based on what is presented to you, something like The Binding of Isaac would be a great example of that. And something with fixed odds management, just so that you can understand how statistics get to where they are, and then you can start to look at things like card counts and resources to outs in a very different way. Something like Yahtzee even could work. But then we talk about meso skills a little bit. Deck reading, database reading, understanding what your opponent might have. Studying databases and card types is really kind of the only way to go about it. When it comes to crafty deck creations and trying to figure out what your opponent might be on, that's a good way to go about deck reading. Just watching content, reading Limitless pages, and kind of understanding what cards are good, what cards are bad, what cards can my opponent possibly have. That starts to work into understanding what resources your opponent might have in order to beat you, and then you can use your macro skills from there with your meso skills to kind of piece together your route to victory based on what you believe they have the ability to have. In addition to that, and under identifying outs really, both identifying your own outs and understanding what your opponent's outs are, just consistently challenging your ability to understand resource states and trying to understand what you have, what your opponent has, and how to kind of refine your play in order to make as many of your options hidden from your opponent, as many of your opponent's options known to you, update your research, develop your research, understand what's going on, execute. The best case scenario for a game like Pokemon is meso-macro intensive skills. So for example, it would be something like a tactical live service game with some sort of economy or some heavy resource management based live game. Things like League of Legends are great for that because there's things with economy, there's things with ultimate charges, percentages, things like that that are very heavy on resources. Both players have it. You need to identify your outs to winning situations. You need to figure out your team's outs, and then you need to figure out your opponent's team's outs, how to counter them, how to address them, how to beat them, all things considered. Bloons Tower Defense Battles is another great example of all things, because again, it's both players having quote-unquote equal resources, but different resources have different weights, different people have different outs to scenarios. How are you going to tactically decide how to punish your opponent for what they're doing, and how can they punish you in return, kind of as that back and forth nature of games. Other trading card games are also great for that, something like One Piece, where you have a lot of sequencing to work on, a lot of very fixed statistics to work on for how to get to your outs, and also how to respond to your opponent's different variable conditions. Even something like Monopoly, with the amount of houses you have being limited, if you just own 2 or 3 strips, each with 4 houses each, you've taken up 75% of the housing real estate, and then people can't buy houses, and then they can't buy hotels, and you own statistically the majority of the field, they're going to be forced to have all of their resources drained from you. So even something like Monopoly can be seen in this meso-macro kind of way, where you understand what you need to do in order to win the game, you understand what your opponents can do, you can understand how to prevent them from doing so, You can try and talk your way into things, talk your way out of things, and really you can refine your strategy around the idea of controlling as many of the resources, as many of the cards as possible. And of course, something like chess, there's a million videos that'll do a better job at justifying chess than I will, so I'm not going to try and kind of convince you otherwise. Chess is an incredible game in those aspects. Now, talking really quick about creators that use both of these sides of skills. When it comes to new guards, we have people like TCG Cow, first year on the scene, already doing day 2s, already doing IC day 2s, already a very strong player from our local region, and they have a prior skill set from games like League of Legends, Rainbow Six, Overwatch, all sorts of different titles that all helped towards them understanding how to sequence their games, how to look for their outs, things of that nature. In addition to that, we have Anch, and we have Noah's deck box, Boa's deck box, however he wants to go about calling it. The overall theme there is that they're either newer players or up-and-coming players who have a lot of other games and a lot of other life experience from those macro skills that helped them pick up the game a lot faster. In addition, there's also old guards that keep up from those same transferables. People like Ian, Rob, and Rowan pivoting card games, pivoting game directions, pivoting their focus. Both of them are pivoting from game to game to game, and they're keeping sharp in their main Pokemon titles. How do they do that? Well, it's by keeping up those macro skills, keeping up those meso skills, and keeping up those core transferable skills at all times in order to make sure that they're not really losing out on Pokemon specific, well, they are losing out on Pokemon specific skills, but they're still keeping all of their fundamental card game skills and fundamental strategic skills intact. Even someone like Flats pivoting from game to game to game to game to game on his streams, or going from doing things like Overwatch and Marvel Rivals to Pokemon for Pokemon VGC. It's not as easy of a gap, but in both cases, you're reading what your opponent has, you're trying to understand what resources they have, you're trying to prevent your ultimate resources from being used in a way that's diminishing, prevent their ultimate abilities from being used in order to overpower you. In this case, I'm talking something like Mega Evolution for VGC and actual ults in something like Overwatch or Marvel Rivals. But really, it's the same skill set in both titles. Even if one has a lot more micro required, it's the same macro and meso skills across both titles that are keeping him at the top of his game and consistent in his results. I think that's the last primary slide. Yeah, that's the last primary slide. I wanted to thank you guys for quickly popping down. I'm sorry for this being a bit of a rushed video, a bit of a late video as well. But I just wanted to get this out of the door because it's a really cool concept, being able to train in one game and improve at the other. And I think that being able to be multidimensional in that aspect is very useful, very efficient, and something to be appreciative of. To introduce myself once again, the name's Gazapniak. I have Modern Regionals Day 2, Regionals Top 8 and State Top 4 as well. Basically a whole lot of rubbish. But the point is, I don't only play Pokemon, I play a lot of games. I try to keep sharp by playing any game possible. And really, it's not all that hard if you know where to look, what questions to ask, and how to go about it. If you want to see me more, you can click the big red button. You can click a couple of other socials. All links are going to be down in the description as well, including to that other video. And I strongly recommend you go look at it because it is an awesome, 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 awesome video. That's all I got time for today. I'll catch you guys all later.